Welcome, and thank you for joining for another whiskey review. Today, we're going to take a look at one of our favorite distilleries, Springbank, and the Longrow series, Dustin. The entry-level bottlings about the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Yeah, so we've got, I don't know the exact years they produced this one, but this is the CV. My understanding of that particular bottling, I've looked at the Springbank, and it was something along the lines of like a bourbon, sherry, port, rum blend.
Yeah, it was exotic.
So my assumption is this one's the same thing, but I couldn't find any hard evidence that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. And then we had
Then we got the 10-year, which I think these actually both were bottled around 2008, believe. So they had a little crossover. So at one point maybe this was the premium, but whatever. And this one does use sherry cask as well as bourbon. I don't believe there's anything else in here, and it could have been all sherry, but if it was,
awfully light.
Yeah,
I would say it was a.
Pretty sure it's a hybrid, but I know the Longrow 14 of this era and the 18 when they first started doing 18s, they were initially all sherry, then they started adding bourbon casks. So it's possible they just used some really refilled ones. And this is the new NAS heavily peated.
Yeah, Longrow, no age statement.
And
Quite a bit lighter.
Looks like urine.
Yeah, it's quite a bit lighter. That's the one starting thing. I had a bottle of this that it took me probably a year or so to get through. All of them basically at 46% ABV.
Yep.
And so, it's a really consistent thing to look at. So it's always fun to look at how a distillery has changed, especially its base offering, over the years, or really any offering for that matter, as long as they're consistent with it. But, I would assume, even though this does have an age statement, it's still close to 10 years, I would think. 8, 9-year-old whiskey.
Bet you it's 6.
Really? That young? Well,
Yeah.
Let's get to it. Which one you want to do first?
Let's just go left to right. We're gonna go. I think this is the older one, but the 10 maybe came out. I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, but these are basically the last 3 they produced.
Yeah. I actually really love this one right off the bat.
Yeah, that's meaty, man.
It's meaty, but it's also sweet. It's got sherry. I get some rum notes actually in there. Get a little bit of oak.
Lots going on with this one.
Now this one, I bet you, is at least 8 years old. If it's not, actually, if I remember, I think on these two, I think you're looking at maybe 6 to like 12 or 15-year-old whiskey. I think there's some older stuff in these. Oh, it's got that Springbank funk.
Yeah, a lot of it. But it complements it really nice in this one.
Yeah, it starts off really sweet, and then it gets funky, and then there's a light salt, but this is probably the least peaty nose I think I've had on one of these.
Yeah, but it's still really earthy.
Yeah. And again, that's the Springbank funkiness.
Yeah, you're right. But that funkiness is just somehow amplified.
I like the fact that when I nose it initially up front, I get sweetness. But then when I dig in, I get earthiness, I get some salt, I get a little bit of the peat.
Yeah, no, it gets funky.
Yeah, I mean, there's even like some vinegar notes in here.
Yeah, the further you go down the rabbit hole. Wow.
Oh, man. Complex and rich.
Yeah, it is. That's a good nose. Man, this is way different.
This is a little more sour, a little more barnyard.
Definitely lighter overall.
Doesn't have the same level of sweetness. I think there is actually more salt and peat here.
It does come off a little bit more sherry cask mixture. It's a little sweeter.
I don't think it's sweeter at all. I think it's more.
Really?
I think it's barnyard. I mean, I almost think it's more like a tomato versus a strawberry.
It's not that acidic to me.
Not the acidity, but the savory, like tomato sauce.
Well, the barnyard is the earthiness in the other one. To me, I quantify those notes as similar notes or
Amped up, though, big time.
But no, to me it feels... No, I think there's good sweetness in this. This comes off far less earthy and far less springbanky. The funk there is not nearly as...
Nose cleaning. This is light and subtle, but very...
For sure.
But it's very nice.
There's some nice chocolate coming up here at the end, too.
I was just about to say there's a little bit of chocolate. Even a hint of like chocolate chili pepper kind of combined.
Yeah, where the first one was, definitely the meat and potatoes, like the main course. This would be a nice dessert.
This had some nice rum notes in it. That's really what separates it. There's some rum and some port sweetness here. Even if that's not what's in here, it's got elements that remind me of those two.
All right, so the current offering.
Dirt.
About what I remember.
There's really not much to it.
Sour dirt. Yeah, I was not impressed the first time at any point when I had my first bottle of that.
This kind of smells like you've gone into Home Depot and you're wanting to get some 2x4s, and you're over there in the section where they've been cutting them.
Yeah, there's a little bit of sawdust there. You're right.
Young sawdust.
Yeah, you're right. Sawdust.
Fresh
there.
cut.
With sour.
There's a little sour.
And, you know, that spring bank earthiness.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talk about a lot of time with the Springbank distillate itself, not the Longrow, but the Springbank sugar cookies. This is kind of like, again, they've brought out some of that, and it's kind of like I'm trying to think. I mean, it's not even like a dough. It's something, it's almost like somebody wanted to like give you like one of those, you know, those ones that don't use, they're gluten-free. It's like a gluten-free attempt at a dough. It's not really dough.
I probably haven't had that. Someone tricked me, maybe, in having that, but no. No, you know what? You know what I'll say about this whiskey though. This reminds me in a lot of ways of Balvenie 12-year-old single barrel.
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
the new bourbon. Well, new,
yeah.
but
If you like that sweet and sour, you would probably like this a lot because it kind of has that sweet sour back and forth with that, with a couple more elements. You know, with a little bit of earthiness, with a little bit of that recognizable Longrow Springbank, whatever you want to call it.
It's not offensive, but it's just kind of.
It's
kind of boring.
Yeah, well, that and sweet and sour. I mean, that is the show, I guess, of the whiskey. It's just very light, what you normally think of Springbank, plus a little bit of that sweet and sour.
I'm less sour less sweet than sour though.
My point is, if you've ever had the Balvenie 12-year-old single barrel, that is a similar experience, just with a couple of elements of Longrow added to it.
Yeah,
that's my take on it anyway. All right,
with you.
So I don't want to drink that yet because I think I'm going to be disappointed. So we'll save that for later.
Go ahead and let's get your thoughts on the taste on this one.
Yeah, I tell you what, even going back to the smell for a minute, which I want to do, this smells great.
Really
It really does. Now it's almost kind of getting the dough notes coming up on this a little bit more. Like this is really kind of getting to where this is an incredibly interesting nose. Man, it's a dirty malt.
Oh yeah,
so
and
different.
That dirty peat. But that classic Longrow peat, oh yeah, it's right there. Up front, it's just a crazy mix of different sweetnesses and a little sour, a little funk, everything you want. But overall, this is actually fairly clean as Longrows go. As Longrows go. Not clean as whiskeys go, but as Longrows go, this is definitely on the cleaner side. It's got a lot of funk and interestingness, but it's not, like the finish isn't really funky. The finish is a little cleaner. Kind of vanilla, clean dough, clean cookies. In fact, actually, I can almost starting to get that sugar cookie thing that Keith always talks about. Mm-hmm. Really well put together. Super complex up front. Little mid palate's not amazing, but overall good whiskey.
Yeah, I mean I pick up a lot of things, but I mean I'm still getting like dough, spice, on here for sure. And then that dirty funkiness. Man, I tell you what, that's a pretty good palate on that. Wow. For a young whiskey, that's fairly impressive. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I think these did have a mix of old and young whiskey in it. I think there were some older whiskeys in these.
There's almost kind of something dark at the end, too. Maybe it's like a dark, I don't know, blackberry almost, without the tartness of it. With just the sweet note of it. I don't know, man. That was pretty impressive. This is only my second time I think I've ever tried that before. I need to get a bottle. Probably not easy to get. Have you already moved on to the 10?
Hopped into the 10.
All right, what are you getting?
10 reminds me so much of the old 18s that were all sherried. It's Longrow at its kind of most classic natural state, which is funky, relying heavily on a sherry element, which kind of is then brought in and adds like an additional layer of funk. It's much less barnyard now, and I'm actually when I nosed it before I went in. It's actually gotten a little sweeter, so I'm a little closer to Mike on the nose now. Good sweetness. This one is got a better mid palate. The finish is probably a little longer here too. Up front, it's much less exciting. This thing is super exciting up front. It's Longrow where it's just kind of
starts out a little slow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But no, I agree. It transitions to me on the mid palate and the finish. Nice silky milk chocolate on that. Mm-hmm. Just a little bit of funk. It's very palatable, pleasant, whether it's on the nose or on the palate. To me, the cask really did a nice job with this one because I can tell that milk chocolate note was probably imparted by that, and really it feels rich for 46.
It does, yeah. I mean, I was going to say the mouth feels really good.
I agree. It's not as interesting is the first one. So, but again, it's it's kind of like when we had the Spring Lake 25 comparison. There was one that was interesting, and there was the one that was the refill sherry that was just smooth milk chocolate that already complemented what we already liked as a malt.
Yeah,
and it was just get out of its way and let a decent cask just let the spirit do what it does.
Yeah.
That's hard to judge between those two because one is just doing just that, and the other one is exotic cask maturation, taking things in a different direction, and it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and again, I think they drink up front. This one's like wow, and then it each step of the way it drops, whereas this one starts off like very ho-hum.
Starts off slow.
And then really kind of gets going.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. The experience builds with one and the experience diminishes with the other without question.
Yeah.
The most impressive thing is the initial nose on the first one. And then with the second one, you're right. Initially, it came off a little bit lighter, light milk chocolate. I mean, things that were nice, but just not as impressive as a comparison. But man, after that, it steadily gained ground the entire time as far as the experience.
Yep.
All right, so we're going now to the... Or did you just take the last one? Okay.
Yeah, so...
Give it to me.
This kind of reminds me of a Brook Lottie, where they're going out and they're getting these locally sourced barleys that's peated, so like the Port Charlotte 10 kind of up front. And it has that very barley forward, slightly peated, really nice kind of light vanillas. And then it gets really sour and really young to the point where it's starting to become an unpleasant whiskey. Doesn't quite get there, but it starts to get there. And then it switches back, gives you a nice finish that kind of comes back to that, Port Charlotte 10. Not as peated, not as rich, but has a lot of those elements. Very classic Longrow. If you really wanted to know what their distillate tasted like with probably refilled casks, this is doing it, and it's fairly young, and it's pretty obvious that it's fairly young.
Yeah, what you're saying is exactly this. It is young whiskey that doesn't have a lot of cask influence on it, and that's what it is. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad whiskey. It's just whiskey that I never really gravitated to or wanted to go back to at any certain point. I had people over, I had them try it, things like that. But I remember when I extinguished this bottle, I was like, oh, finally, off of my bar. You know what I mean? Because it never really got better over time. So I probably had the bottle for a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this has been open for a while. I picked this up a while ago. In fact, I think I picked all three of these up at the same time, which was almost getting close to a year now, Mike. It's crazy to say.
Yeah, but were these other two, are enjoyable whiskeys that I would want to have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this one is it's considerably lesser than the other two. So.
Yeah. So we can definitely take that one out of the versus side because it's last. Yeah. All right, so what are you taking for what's your pick, though? Again, versus series, Mike?
Yeah, versus.
Which one do you drink at a bar? Money's no object.
Man, I'm going with the first one. Right here. It's just too interesting of a whiskey. This may be as good, maybe even better of a whiskey, overall whiskey. Mm-hmm. But this is something I'll remember. Again, I've had whiskeys similar to this. Like you said, it was like the old 18s, right? Yeah. I think the old 18s were a little bit better, the ones that I've tried before. Okay. However, I understand they're a similar whiskey. Mm-hmm. Point is, those whiskeys, I would probably prefer the 18. Where this one, I really couldn't compare something, so it's a unique enough experience where I would want to go with that. So obviously 1, 2, 3 for me.
Yeah. I'm really torn.
I agree.
Torn.
What do you value? You value something that's different and really good and interesting, or do you value something that's just really good at what it does well?
The thing for me is, if I'm sitting at a bar, we're having a long conversation, and I've got one glass of whiskey while we're talking, the finish on this particular bottle is so much deeper, so much longer, good spiciness, really nice mouthfeel. I really enjoy that. Whereas this, you're right, it's a more exciting whiskey. It's got more interest. But I think sitting at a bar having a conversation, I'm just barely picking this, and I'm giving them the exact same score. I don't know what I'd score them, but they're going to get the exact same score because they're so good. It's just for different reasons.
So if you're at the bar, I guess it depends on what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Let me counter with this, because I like that analogy. If you're talking about the whiskey, would you rather be talking about the intricacies of what you're getting off of this whiskey or this one?
Ooh. This one would be the more interesting whiskey to talk about, you're right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we're talking about, hey, how'd your day go? What's your favorite sports team? Or you're talking about...
Yeah, you don't want to think about it.
Well,
and if you don't want to think about it and just have a nice, enjoyable whiskey that you're probably going to like and someone else that enjoys these Longrows, for sure, I'd pick this one.
well, you know why I like this one is while I'm talking, and you know I like to talk.
Who doesn't?
I'm going to be tasting the whiskey for longer. It's going to be
Yeah, for
lingering. That's just going to make it the more enjoyable experience.
I mean, you're right. This one dissipates. I mean, I agree with that. It does.
So that's to me kind of where this is maybe the slightly better whiskey in my head, but it's just so cool up front. Honestly, these two are great whiskeys, and I wish Longrow would bring them back.
Yeah, these are super quality. This is whiskey. If I never had this whiskey again, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to say, this is really the weak spot in the Springbank line because
Yeah, they go and get better.
Hazelburn 10, Springbank 10, for starters, they're 10-year-old whiskeys. This is not.
You love that Springbank 10.
I do.
Yeah. All right. So that's where we're at as far as these whiskeys. If you're a fan of Longrow, if you had a chance to try these entry-level whiskeys throughout the last 15 years or so, let us know what you guys think. I really like that first one. What was it, QC?
Yeah, about 160 probably. You can get you one of these online. If you go hunting, you probably got to pay shipping, so it may get close to 200, which is probably pushing it.
Yeah, it's splurging on that bottle.
However, I paid 75 for a set of 3.
Oh, that's
for
right.
The Hazelburn,
yeah.
the Longrow, and the Springbank. Great value. I think these were 200 mLs. Yeah, 200. So it's almost a full bottle for 75. That's worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
This one, about 120, I think, is what the going rate is, what you can find these.
Yeah, I mean, that's still worth it, I think.
I do too. And I mean, again, this is 2008 bottling. You're talking about really going back more than a decade to see what Springbank used to do.
I don't know what to go for now, but I got mine for $40. I remember that distinctly from Master of Malt. Plus shipping, but I got like 3.
90.
Whew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
If you can find these in the UK, they are still about 40, 50 bucks. But Springbank in the UK is virtually impossible to get.
yeah, no, it's you got to pay for this distiller for sure. They don't make a lot of them. I mean, that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
rare, like diamonds or anything else. All right, those are our thoughts on the whiskeys. If you guys had a chance to look at these, or you had a chance to try these, let us know your thoughts on the whiskey. And until next time, Dustin, what do we wish the folks?
Happy drinking.
We'll see you next time.